They always said I was lucky. Lucky to be born into the Montgomery family. Lucky to be raised with privilege. Lucky to sit in a room full of legacy. But the truth, I wasn't the heir. I was the afterthought. The second child. The girl. The one who smiled politely while the real decisions were made behind closed doors I wasn't allowed to enter. My older brother, Nathan, was the golden boy. Born first, praised loudest. He walked through life with the arrogance of someone who had never been told no. Meanwhile, I was busy trying to prove I even belonged at the table. I graduated top of my class at Wharton, earned my MBA while sleeping 3 hours a night and surviving off vending machine coffee, while Nathan missed board meetings because he was on some yacht in the Mediterranean. But guess who was still the CEO in waiting? Not me. Never me. They called me logistics liaison at the company. It sounded important. It wasn't. I was a glorified assistant. A glorified assistant with billion-dollar ideas but no voice to speak them. I remember one particular board meeting. I had spent 3 weeks compiling a proposal to optimize our international supply chain. It would have cut costs by 18% across Q2. I walked in, documents printed, graphs highlighted, hands trembling but hopeful. My father didn't even look up. Nathan leaned back in his chair, smirking. And my sister-in-law, Danielle, who married her way into the board, looked me up and down and said, "Sweetheart, we really don't need another spreadsheet. Why don't you bring in more coffee?" They laughed. I nodded. And I walked out. Not because I was weak, but because I was watching, listening, storing everything. Let them think I was harmless. Let them forget I had been raised in the same house, heard the same stories, studied the same balance sheets. I knew this company better than they did because I had nothing handed to me. Everything I knew, I fought to understand. Every piece of the puzzle I stole in silence. And then it happened. I was called into the main conference room on a Monday morning. I remember the way my father looked calm, surgical, like a man removing a splinter. "Nora," he said, not even offering a seat. "We've decided to restructure. Your department will be absorbed by ops. Thank you for your service." Just like that. No warning, no explanation, no eye contact. I was being fired. By my own family. Nathan didn't even bother pretending to feel bad. Danielle was already flipping through emails like I'd already left the room. I looked at my father. His hands were folded, his tone final. And I realized they never intended to let me grow. They just needed me quiet. So I gave them exactly what they wanted. I didn't cry, didn't ask why, didn't beg. I walked out of that room with my back straight and my hands empty. And before I left, I said one thing. "You're going to regret building a kingdom without checking the foundation." I meant it. Because while they celebrated my absence, I was already planning my resurrection. You see, they thought they'd fired the liability, but they just set fire to the fuse under everything they thought was untouchable. I didn't start with much. No fancy office, no team, no investors knocking at my door. All I had was a cracked phone, a second-hand laptop, and a fury so quiet it could burn through steel. For 2 weeks. I stayed in a tiny rental above a laundromat with buzzing fluorescent lights and paper-thin walls. My bed was a mattress on the floor, my desk, a crate stacked on old textbooks. But I had my idea, the one they laughed at, the one they never let me pitch, the one that kept me awake for months while Danielle rolled her eyes and Nathan checked stock prices. It was called Novex. Not just software, but a fully integrated system that reimagined supply chain efficiency. It had the potential to reduce waste, anticipate logistic bottlenecks, and adapt in real time. But more than that, it had the power to destroy everything the Montgomery family built on outdated systems and inherited arrogance. I knew the industry, I knew their weaknesses, and I knew the holes they didn't even realize were bleeding. So I did what any underestimated woman would do. I built. I started with a single client, a local startup selling organic cosmetics, struggling with late shipments and chaotic inventory. I offered them a deal free consulting for 3 months. In exchange, they'd let me use their data to prove Novex worked. They agreed. For 90 days. I barely slept. I coded through the night, tested during the day, and met with warehouse managers over takeout in parking lots. And it worked. Their on-time delivery jumped from 68% to 97%. Their cost dropped 22%. Inventory discrepancies went from daily chaos to rare anomalies. Word spread. Within 6 months, I had 12 small businesses begging for access. Then came the mid-tier clients, then the Fortune 500 inquiries. But I still kept my name out of it. The contracts read Novex Solutions, no CEO name, no founder press releases. I wanted silence to be my armor, because revenge isn't loud. It's not screaming across boardrooms. It's not slamming doors or sobbing into wine glasses. Revenge is building something so undeniable, so immovable, that when they finally realize it's you, it's already too late. And then one morning, it happened. I was scanning through new client requests when I saw at Montgomery Holdings their name on my screen. They were requesting a demo, desperate for logistical efficiency after several public delays and a disastrous quarterly report. My breath caught, but I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I scheduled their demo under a pseudonym, and when the call connected, I watched Nathan and Danielle appear on my screen, wearing the exact same arrogance they had the day they fired me. Only this time they were asking questions, trying to sound important, trying to hide the cracks in their pride. I walked them through my system in a calm, clear voice. No emotion, no clue it was me. They raved about the result. They said, "We need this," and I said, "We'll be in touch." But what they didn't know was that they'd just stepped into the very web I wove with every ounce of humiliation they ever handed me. And I wasn't done spinning. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but out of clarity. I sat in my dark apartment, the soft hum of the city bleeding through cracked windows, and I thought about every single moment they underestimated me, every slammed door, every patronizing smile, every time they said, "You're not ready." And now they were begging for a solution I built with my bare hands. But this wasn't the time for celebration. This was strategy. I knew the Montgomerys. They didn't just want a product. They wanted control. They'd try to buy me out, to steal the tech, to dig into who was really behind Novex. So I made moves before they could. I restructured ownership, buried my name behind 5 shell entities across 3 countries, transferred trademarks, masked IP addresses, encrypted everything. I wasn't just protecting an idea, I was protecting a future, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about building a legacy so bulletproof that not even my own family could touch it. 2 weeks after that first demo, I got the email from Nathan. We were very impressed with the Novex platform. We'd like to schedule an executive proposal to discuss licensing and potential acquisition. Acquisition? Of course. They didn't want partnership. They wanted ownership. I replied with a single line, "We don't sell what we're still scaling." "Thank you for your interest," he responded 2 hours later, less polished this time. "We're offering 8 figures. Don't be stupid." I laughed, not the kind of laugh you hear at a party, the kind that echoes in your ribs and reminds you you've already won. Because I wasn't stupid, but I remembered when they treated me like I was. I let them stew for 10 days, no response, no follow-up. Then I scheduled a second demo with the board of Montgomery Holdings. This time, I had a plan. I sent a junior rep to run the session, someone they'd never met. I watched the whole thing through a hidden camera feed, quiet, invisible, listening. They were desperate. Every stat we shared made them lean in closer. Every graph that showed how Novex could cut their bleeding made them sweat. They tried to act unfazed, but I saw the shift. They weren't in power anymore. They were pitching, begging for relevance in a world that had outpaced them, and I was the one who rewrote the rules. After the meeting, my rep returned to the office and asked, "Should we take the deal?" I shook my head. "Not yet. They don't even know who they're kneeling to." The more they pushed, the more I expanded. Novex became the backbone for 2 logistics giants in Europe, then an aerospace firm, then the international arm of a fashion empire. Meanwhile, the Montgomery brand. It faded, scandals, operational failures, leadership leaks. The press called it a legacy in decline. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that every competitor now running circles around the Montgomerys was powered by me, by Novex, by the girl they fired. And still, I waited. Waited until their stock fell below $12, until their CEO resigned, until Nathan stepped in as interim leader, trying to patch a sinking ship with broken boards. Then, I made the call. Not as Nora Montgomery, but as Elena Vale, my legal alias, and the name listed on Novex's offshore parent company. I requested an in-person meeting, neutral ground, 1 hour. They agreed immediately, because now they needed me. They had no idea. They already belonged to me. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to feel the silence before the storm. The meeting was scheduled at a neutral private conference suite on the 48th floor of a glass tower downtown. Polished wood, tempered glass. Views that stretched like power itself. I didn't wear a power suit. I wore black, simple, clean, unbranded. Because real authority doesn't announce itself, it just enters the room. And everyone feels it. My heels echoed softly against the marble floor as I walked in. Alone. No entourage. No assistant. Just me, and the empire they tried to erase. At 9:03 a.m., the doors opened. Nathan walked in first, still tall, still smug, still carrying the aura of someone clinging to a crumbling throne. Behind him, Danielle, lipstick too bright, smile too tight. She hadn't aged well under pressure. And then came 2 board members I remembered from childhood dinners, once kind, now calculating. They didn't recognize me. Not yet. Ms. Vale, Nathan said, extending his hand. His voice smooth, practiced. The voice of a man used to lying for a living. I shook it. Firm. Cold. Shall we? I gestured to the table. They sat. And so it began. They launched into their pitch like clockwork. Polite desperation dressed in corporate language. Montgomery Holdings was facing a transitional phase. They needed innovation partners. They saw Novex as a key strategic acquisition. I watched them carefully, each word measured, each glance between them rehearsed. But beneath it all I saw the rot, the panic behind Nathan's eyes, the way Danielle's hand trembled when she reached for her water. They were not here to negotiate. They were here because this was their last card. And I held the deck. When they finished, Nathan smiled too wide. We believe an 8-figure offer, with full integration and an executive board seat for yourself, would be mutually beneficial. I leaned back in my chair, let the silence breathe. Then I asked, "Why now?" Nathan blinked. "Excuse me, why me? Why Novex? Why this moment?" He faltered. "Just a second." Danielle stepped in. "Because we recognize value, and we're ready to evolve." I nodded slowly. Then I pulled out a tablet, tapped once. A live dashboard filled the screen behind me. Novex metrics, growth charts, client expansion, revenue spikes, global contracts. And beneath it all, a web of connections, each line tracing back to a parent entity, V Corp International, which they still hadn't realized. I owned. Nathan leaned forward. You're working with them." I smiled just enough. "I am them." Silence. Not a frozen kind, a collapsing kind. The sound of legacy cracking under the weight of truth. Danielle's jaw went slack. The 2 board members exchanged glances, uncertain whether they were witnessing betrayal or rebirth. And then I stood. I walked toward the window. Let them watch my reflection framed by the skyline. You fired me. You erased me. You laughed at me. And now, you're pitching to me. I turned, my voice steady, but cold enough to freeze glass. You want Novex? Here's my offer. I acquire Montgomery Holdings, entirely. No board seats, no co-ownership, no voting rights. Nathan's eyes widened. You're joking. I'm not. Danielle snapped. You can't do that, I already did. I tossed a folder onto the table. Inside the paperwork, the acquisitions, the signed contracts with key investors, Former shareholders, silent but strategic. The Montgomery family no longer held controlling interest. I did, and they were the last to know. Nathan stood. This is revenge. I raised my chin. This is precision. He started to speak again, but I cut him off. You taught me business. Remember, you taught me how to win, but you never taught me how to lose. I walked to the door, paused. You can stay on as consultants, hourly, if you can stomach working under someone who once brought you coffee. And with that, I left. No applause, no dramatic music, just the sound of them breaking, quietly, exactly the way they broke me. It didn't take long. One leak, one headline, and the silence I had so carefully cultivated for years exploded. Montgomery Legacy. Acquired by anonymous tech entity. Novex revealed as the powerhouse behind global logistics. Shakeup, the woman behind the curtain. Who is Elena Vale? I watched it unfold from the comfort of my office, walls lined with floor-to-ceiling glass. The city below looked small now, just like they once made me feel. I didn't respond to the press. I didn't sit for interviews. I let the whispers spread. Because the less I said, the more they clung to every detail they could dig up. They found a birth certificate, a quiet name change in Switzerland, a series of shell companies leading back to me, and suddenly I was no longer invisible. I was the ghost who outbuilt them. The name they tried to bury was now carved into every contract they couldn't escape. I got a call from Forbes, then Bloomberg, then Time, but I only answered one, the one that mattered. A young journalist, female, first-generation college graduate. She'd written a feature on overlooked founders a year ago, and it stuck with me. I invited her to my office. She arrived shaking, clutching a leather notebook. I told her one thing before we started. This isn't a revenge story. This is a clarity story. She blinked. What do you mean? They thought I wanted to destroy them. I didn't. I just wanted to exist without asking for permission. And with that, I told her everything. Not just about Novex, but about being fired, dismissed, erased. I told her about growing up in rooms where my ideas were taken and repackaged, then praised as if they were never mine. About watching my brother be handed companies he didn't know how to run. About being told to smile more in meetings where I was the only one who read the actual reports. I didn't speak with bitterness. I spoke with precision. She cried halfway through. Not because it was sad, but because she recognized the story. It wasn't just mine. It was every woman's who was ever told she was too much or not enough. The article dropped 2 weeks later. The CEO who built an empire from exile. It shattered every expectation. It wasn't polished PR. It was raw, it was real, it was mine, and the industry finally took notice. I started receiving invitations, panels, investor summits, global innovation forums. They all wanted the woman who came from nothing and bought the kingdom that cast her out. But I wasn't done yet, because this wasn't just about Montgomery Holdings. It was about every door slammed in my face, every room I was told I couldn't enter, every time they called me a backup plan. So I launched something new, the Elevate Initiative, a fund for underrepresented founders, especially women, whose ideas were dismissed by gatekeepers with surnames carved into old buildings. I invested in them, I mentored them, I put them in rooms where I was once denied entry, and I watched as they rose, not for me, but for them. Because real power isn't what you take, it's what you build so others don't have to bleed for it like you did. One day, I got another email. Subject line request from Nathan Montgomery. I opened it, read it twice. He wanted a meeting, not as an executive, not as a brother, but as a man who finally understood the gravity of what he'd lost. I said yes. We met in the same boardroom where he'd once looked down at me like I was a child trying to play CEO. This time he didn't sit at the head of the table. He waited for me to offer a seat. I underestimated you, he said. I nodded. You didn't just win. You rewrote the rules. I let him speak. Because some things lose power the moment you try to justify them. And then he asked, do you hate me? I looked him in the eye. No, I just don't need you anymore. That's when he broke. The same man who once ran a $1 billion empire. Now just a person sitting across from the girl he called expendable. I stood to leave. Before I did, I placed a small velvet box on the table. He frowned, opening it. Inside a nameplate, old, scratched. From my desk at Montgomery Holdings, it read Nora M., Logistics Coordinator. His face fell. I kept it. I said, as a reminder of the seat they gave me, so I could build the one no one would ever dare take away. And with that, I walked out. I used to imagine this day, not out of spite, but out of survival. In the darkest nights, in the quiet rooms where grief echoed louder than ambition. I pictured it, a stage, a spotlight, a name, my name, not whispered behind backs or scribbled in footnotes, but carved in light, unignorable. And now, that day had arrived. It was the annual Global Visionary Summit, held every year in Geneva, a gathering of the world's top innovators, policymakers, and power brokers. They had asked me to be the keynote speaker, not as a tech founder, not as a novelty, but as a force. I walked through the corridor alone, not because I didn't have a team, but because this final walk was mine. Behind me were years of silence, betrayal, sleepless nights, and code written between tears. Ahead of me, a stage that once belonged to the people who told me I didn't belong anywhere. I stepped out. The room went still. Thousands of eyes. Every major CEO, world leaders, former classmates, former enemies. And in the third row, my father, Nathan, Danielle. No one needed to say a word, because now they sat where they used to make me stand, looking up. I stood behind the podium, paused, let the silence settle in. And then I said when I was 24, I was fired from the company my family built. Not because I failed, but because I dared to speak. They didn't expect that. I saw heads tilt, eyebrows rise. They told me I wasn't a good fit, that I didn't understand legacy, that I lacked the vision to lead, so I left. Not just the company, but their definition of power. I let that linger. And in that silence, I built. I spoke of Novex, of rebuilding from scratch, of learning that sometimes the greatest strength is the ability to wait, to rise without needing to roar. I didn't tell them what I lost. I told them what I gained. I gained clarity, the kind you only find at rock bottom, where you realize the walls they built weren't meant to protect you, but to keep you in your place. I chose to dismantle those walls, brick by brick. Until one day, I didn't just walk free, I built my own fortress. They listened, not because they had to, but because something in them recognized the weight of every word. After the speech, I walked off stage. They stood, the entire auditorium, a standing ovation for the girl they once silenced. But I didn't smile, not because I wasn't proud, but because the applause didn't define me. What I did when no one was clapping, that's what made me unstoppable. 2 hours later, I held a private boardroom reception, global partners, founders, and, by invitation, the Montgomery family. They entered quietly. Gone was the arrogance. What remained was acknowledgement, not love, not warmth, just the long overdue recognition that they had been wrong. Nathan approached first. I don't know what to say. I looked him in the eyes. Then say nothing. Just witness. He nodded. Danielle extended a hand. I shook it, briefly. My father came last. There was something in his eyes I hadn't seen since I was a child. Not pride, not shame, just a quiet understanding that the daughter he once dismissed now held the keys to everything. I turned to my assistant. Bring it in. She wheeled out a gift box. Midnight black, no ribbon. I placed it on the table. This is the last remnant of the Montgomery legacy. Nathan hesitated. What is it? The original shareholder agreement. Signed by all of you. Binding. Outdated. I opened it. Tore it once. Twice. Let the pieces fall like ash onto the marble floor. Danielle gasped. My father closed his eyes. I looked at them and said, We're done playing by rules written by ghosts. From here on, I write the terms, I build the table, and if you want a seat, you ask. Silence. Not anger, not protest, just acceptance. Because they knew there was nothing left to take from me. I had already taken it all back. Now, my company spans 43 countries. We power entire continents. We've redefined supply chains. We've redefined power. But more than that, I redefined myself. Not as an heir, not as a survivor, not as the girl they fired, but as the woman who walked away from the fire and came back holding the match.